Hello again, welcome to the Practical Animal channel. The channel is for you if you want to know what it takes to work with animals. It's all I ever wanted to do, and if that's true for you, then you come to the right channel. My name's John Beaumont and I've got degrees in wildlife management, a master's degree in conservation biology and a degree in veterinary medicine. Every week I interview an animal industry professional or conservationist, and my degrees enable me to ask appropriate questions so that you can get an insight into what it takes to work with animals. I ask my weekly guests questions about the skills needed in order to work with the animal that they work with. So join me on an around the world survey of animal jobs as I interview people who are experts in their field. This week, Marty Majorotto is a trapper in Alaska. He talks to me about what it takes to be a successful trapper. The question is trapping a sustainable form of wildlife management? Yes, it is, and Marty tells us why. What jobs are there for trappers?
As far as actually trapping or trying to support the trapping?
Either.
What I've done is a trapper traps in the winter, so you have to have a pretty good summer job because it's really hard to make ends meet trapping. So summer job, what I did is I fought forest fires. So that's a summertime job, and in the winter, of course, there's no forest fires, so I would get laid off, and then I could do my trapping. Some people work construction. Up here in Alaska, construction usually only goes in the summer because in the winters it's too cold and dark to really do that. So, yeah, it's anything you can try and find to do. A lot of trappers actually are guides, and work in the hunting industry so that they can trap in the winter.
Are there any circumstances, Marty, where it can be a full-time job all year round? Like if you have a shop selling supplies, maybe?
Yeah, certainly there is that. But then when you trap, it's pretty much a full-time job the way I do it out in the bush. So if you're running a shop, you'll have to get somebody to run that for you because then you're going to be gone. So trapping is something that, unless you're doing it part-time, it encompasses everything in your life. You live out there, so it's pretty hard to be two places at once. So usually you have to devote, the way I do it, bush trapping, you have to devote your time totally to it. And then in the summers and the off seasons, that's when you can do whatever you do to try to afford to keep trapping.
Marty, what makes somebody want to be a trapper?
For me, it was just something that was ingrained in me. My father had a lot to do with it because he trapped a little bit. He wasn't quite addicted the way I am, but he showed me some of a small trap line he did on the weekends, and it's for me, it's just love of the woods and the animals. I mean, a lot of people say, well, trappers, you must hate animals because you kill them, but I mean, the opposite is true. I just love being around animals and being in the woods.
For people who are anti and don't really understand it, how can you sort of explain your ethics regarding, well, I'm a naturalist, I love animals, and I love trapping them as well? How do you explain it?
Well, for me, especially with the new green movement, there's nothing more green than fur, because you go out and harvest an animal, and you do it responsibly. So there's always, we call it seed, but there's always animals there, and as long as you don't damage the habitat and the environment, there will always be animals. They replenish, and you don't, to harvest an animal, you don't damage the environment or the habitat. It's you go in there and you don't damage anything, so it's a renewable resource. And it's I don't know, there's a lot involved with why it's appealing, besides being in the wilderness. It's, you're trying to think like that animal. You're trying to, an animal can go anywhere it wants, and you as a trapper, you don't have a lot of the instincts animals do, so you have to try to get in their head, so to speak, because you have to get them to step in one particular small spot, and to be able to do that is the challenge, at least to me. And so it isn't, you have to know everything about that animal, what it likes, what it doesn't like, where it wants to sleep, where it wants to feed, what it eats. It's kind of getting in an animal's head for me. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but sorry.
No problem at all. It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Marty, I'm guessing that species that are trapped in Alaska, target species, if you will, are different from what they are, say, in Florida. What target species are trapped in Alaska?
Well, in Alaska, especially in the interior where I'm at, Alaska is so huge. It's a different environments altogether. But here in the interior, people either are marten trappers or lynx trappers, usually. And certainly there's people that like to trap wolves, beaver, otter, muskrat. But for the interior, it's lynx and marten mainly.
Marty, how did your own career develop as a trapper and on TV?
As like I said, I got my start with my dad, and when I went on his trap line, there was just something about it that made me go, "This is what I'm going to do. This is fascinating. This really motivates me." So, and then the more I started craving being farther out in the wilderness, to be where there's no other people. And so I didn't grow up in Alaska. I grew up in the lower 48, and I guess that's kind of driven my life ever since I can remember.
And you've been on television, haven't you, on the History Channel on Mountain Men? How did that come about?
Um, Randy Zarki, who is he's the president of the Alaska Trappers Association. You know, he gets inquiries all the time. You know, just like from you. But he got inquiries from a writer that wanted to do a pro trapping piece, and you know, trapping has been beat up in the past. So whenever I can, you know, show the real why people do it, not this blood sport thing that they try to show. So anyways, this guy wanted to do a piece on trapping in the bush. So I didn't want to, but you know, anyways, he came out, he did a piece, and he wrote for Field and Stream magazine, which is a fairly popular outdoor magazine in America, in the United States. And it was at the time when these reality shows were starting to get popular. And I think I got a number of phone calls after that article came out, and I wasn't interested because, you know, for me, a lot of the reality shows seemed like they weren't real. So anyways, one thing led to another. A small company got a hold of me, a small production company, and said that, you know, they wanted to show the positive, real side of living in the bush, and trapping is, of course, is part of that. So that's how I got into it, reluctantly, but
Marty, what skills and personal qualities does a person need to be a successful trapper?
you got to want it. Well, that in this case, it has to be almost a passion. You have to be able to be very comfortable in a harsh environment, and I guess not enjoy hardship, but be able to handle it. And you have to have a pretty optimistic outlook, because like when I wake up in the morning, there's always a plan. And I don't think I've ever went to bed and went, well, that plan worked. It almost never does. Mother Nature has other ideas. So you have to be adaptable, I guess, and just love being out in the woods and just dealing with those challenges that all that entails.
Marty, what conservation or research activities the trappers engage in?
Well, the trapper is more like, I guess I would say it's more like farming. You know, when I get out every year, when I get out on the trap line, I kind of assess by tracks and sign what animals are there and how many there are there. And then as I start trapping, if that sign starts to look like, well, I've taken the cream of the crop, if you want, then you don't trap anymore, because you want, you know, you're just working against yourself. If you trap everything that's there, well, then what are you going to do next year? You might have to get a job. So, yeah, a trapper is probably one of the conservation is huge in his mind, because he wants to continue what he's doing. So you're always assessing, okay, what's here and how much can I take without hurting, you know, the population as a whole. So it's, yeah, conservation is huge for a trapper.
going off at a tangent, cabin fever, is that a real thing? What is it, and how do you prevent it?
Well, cabin fever is a real thing, and I think some of it has to do with the short daylight. Like right now, it's here. It's after 9 o'clock and it's dark. And then you coupled with a cold, which we are in right now, you're kind of cabin bound. And when you do go outside, it's, when it's 30, 40 below, it's pretty uncomfortable to be out there. Certainly you do it, but you end up spending a lot of time in a cabin with not too many distractions, because if you're not reading or writing, it isn't like you're on a phone or you're watching a TV. And so you get a little stir crazy. It's like, boy, I want to go outside. So you go outside for a little while and it's so cold, then you come back in. So cabin fever is a real thing that the trappers in the bush of Alaska anyways have to deal with. But I think you have to be comfortable in your own skin. You can't sit around going, I have nothing to do on board. You do stuff, and you have to be comfortable maybe just sitting there and pondering life, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, you just have to be comfortable with being alone with yourself.
Marty, which books or people or meetings have most influenced your own thinking on trapping?
First and foremost was my dad taking me out on the trap line. But then once I realized that I really enjoyed that kind of life, I've always been a reader. And I guess the first thing was a magazine called Fur Fish Game that I actually ended up writing articles for later in life. And then books, there were several books that really got me thinking about the far north and the wilderness and trapping there. One was called North to Cree Lake, was written by a guy named Alex Karras, I believe. And he just talked about him and his brother going out into the wilderness of Canada and trapping. And another one was called Mink, Mary, and Me. And all these are out of print, I think, by now. But that was another one. Same thing. A guy headed out into the bush and then eventually got his wife. Once he got established, he brought his wife out there and they had a pretty fascinating life. There's that's one of the draws of the bush is there's no day is the same. You don't wake up in the morning and go, okay, today is like yesterday. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I'll end up here. And the next day will be the same. That never happens. There's always something.
When you look out your window and you see it's snowing or raining, do you think, oh, I'm not going out right now, I'm going to leave it? Or do you have to have the attitude, yes, I'm going out?
Yeah, I go out. It's snowing. Here rain is almost unheard of in the winter. It happens on rare occasions, but yeah, snow does not bother me. If it's snowing, that's fine. The only thing that will slow me down is real cold, because it can be dangerous. I trap with a snow machine, so cold makes everything harder. And if you get way out and that snow machine is just an engine, and engines stop running all the time. So you have to kind of weigh, well, how important is it for me to get to where I want to go today? And if I do that and something happens, what are you going to do about it? You can't just assume you're going to run out, start the snow machine, and check 10 or 15 miles of line and know you're going to be back at the cabin then that evening. You have to be prepared for that. So I guess what stops me is cold. Dark, snow doesn't.
I guess you have to have some basic mechanical skills, do you, in order to maintain the snow machine?
You do, and it's a learned thing. It's the school of hard knocks. Yes, if you can't in the bush, if you can't fix it, it stays broke. So it's if the machine's not running, especially when you're, say, 10 miles from any place that's reasonably warm, you have to fix it. So you have to figure it out. And then if you don't, there's a long walk involved. And then when you do figure out what the problem is, you'll remember that and you'll know how to fix it next time. So it's a constant learning thing. And it's not just the snow machine, it's everything. It's, you're totally self-sufficient. If something goes wrong, no one's gonna fix it for you. You can't throw up your hands and say, okay, I'm done. Let's do something else now. It's up to you to fix it, whatever it is.
So somebody living on the outskirts of London in England, moving out to Alaska to pursue a trapper's life, would have a fair amount of skills to learn, yeah?
Yes, they would. And I think certainly if I can do it, anybody can do it. But it takes that drive, that passion to want to do it, because you'll get to a point where you'll go, this isn't worth it. And as soon as you say that, then you're done. It's over. If that gets into your head, you can never think that. You're thinking, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is a problem and I'm going to fix it.
Brilliant. Marty, how do you see the trapping industry today?
Trapping it's funny because the world markets and world economics and stuff play a huge part in what the value of fur. So right now, the stuff that's going on, Russia and is a big buyer of fur, and so here I am out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska worrying about the economy in Russia so I can maybe pay for my gas. But to me, it's always been an ebb and flow. There were times in the old mountain men days when you could make money, you could make a living at it. And I think that will come again. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. But in the old days, if you wanted to be warm, you wore fur, wool, or I guess down, that there was nothing else. So of course, if you wanted to be warm, fur isn't just a fashion, it's utility. You have to be warm. Now, with all the synthetic stuff that's out there, you have more choices. So I think a lot is that has changed with the fur industry. But eventually, you know, a lot of that stuff is not, it's not a renewable thing to keep making synthetic insulation, where fur is renewable. So I think it'll come around again, but I'm more of an optimist in that regard.
I was going to say, Marty, how do you see the trapping industry developing over, say, the next 10 years?
I think there'll always be trappers in fur, just because it doesn't matter what the fashion is, it's warm. When you're here in Alaska, especially when it's 30 and 40 below, people will wear fur. They might not even be trappers or even understand it, but they know it's cold out and I want to be warm. So I think fur will always be there, and people will wear it, and it's beautiful. I mean, there's no getting around that.
What advice, Marty, can you offer somebody wanting to take up the trapping lifestyle?
Well, the way the situation stands now, you have to have the drive, the want to do it. And then well, for me, I mean, I was always a trapper, and I came to Alaska. I didn't know anyone. I started going to the trappers meetings and talking to the trappers that were there. And, you know, this is what I want to do. Do you have any advice? And that's what I would do. I would say, hey, I want to go into the bush and trap. What advice do you have? And if you're at the Alaska Trappers Association, a meeting, they meet monthly during the winter, you know, you're gonna start getting some leads into trying to achieve that goal.
That's brilliant. Marty, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I guess I never thought of that, but I mean, really, trapping has gotten a bad rap in the past, but it's like anything, you know, you're harvesting a renewable resource. Yeah, there's some people that maybe think that's not good, but the reality is, if we want to sit here and like have this conversation, renewable resources are being harvested, and some of them that aren't are being harvested as well. So yeah, I think we just have to realize the natural world's out there, and you have to use some of it and it responsibly, and it will always be there. And that's just the way of it.
Marty, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been absolutely fascinating, a real insight. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have too. Thanks very much for being on the Practical Animal Channel, Marty Maiorotto.
It's my pleasure. It's nice talking to you.